these are some really good elections here where if you want to start something, if you want to initiate something, these are great times to do it. These are very auspicious times to do it. Welcome back to your favorite weekly horoscope, this time for March 20th through March 26th of 2023. My name is Cam White. Thank you guys so much for being here. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and comment below. Let me know what your thoughts are, or if you just want to help me boost the algorithm. Anyway, we have... Part of me wants to say this is a bad week. The other part of me is like, well, it really kind of depends on who you are, just like, life in and of itself. But I think an easy definitive statement I could say about this week is that the energy that we've been feeling since really September ends. So Mars has been in one sign since September, October, November it went retrograde, December it was retrograde, January it was retrograde. It stationed direct at the end of January. Then it was still in Gemini all of February. And then now we're at the very end of March, and Mars finally leaves one sign. Like it finally moves over. So the way I'd like to just talk about this is a week of things finally feeling like they're moving on, whether that's for the better or for the worse. So let's go ahead and get started. Monday, we're starting off this week with the moon sextiling Uranus, as well as conjoining Neptune. So the moon just hitting the outer planets is kind of a loosey-goosey kind of feel. It's not really super definitive. But two of the highlights that we have on Monday is Venus conjoining Rahu. And for those that aren't familiar with Rahu, that is the north node. And the sun is ingressing into Aries. We have spring finally beginning. And if you are someone like me that typically loves sunshine but lives in a very wintry place, this is like the moment I've been waiting for, is spring to finally start. So Monday is going to feel not bad or good. I would kind of almost put it like all over the place. And the reason being is, for one, is the moon is waning here. I mean, it's like a dark moon at this point. We're getting ready for this new moon in Aries that we have coming up, which is a really exciting part about this week. But the moon is going to be making a sextile to, where's Uranus? To Uranus, and be conjoining Neptune. So the moon in Pisces, right? Our emotions a little all over the place. We're kind of sensitive. We're kind of feeling things out. It'll sextile Uranus, where there's this sense of some kind of disruption, maybe in a good way, maybe in a bad way. And then as the moon conjoins Neptune, things get a little cloudy. Things get a little confusing. But a better way I'd like to put this is, with this being a dark moon and we're getting ready for this new moon, this is a new moon in Aries. This is a supercharged new moon. This is like, we're ready to go. We're ready to bounce forward. But I think as the moon conjoins Neptune for the most of the day on Monday, it's really about being like, okay, not only, I don't like always saying that term, like, what is your truth? But more so, like, what is real for you and what is not real for you? And on one level, this is kind of just discerning, okay, like, where do you have imaginary fears playing out in your life? Where are you distorting something in your view that is hard for you to navigate through? On the other hand, there is this level of embracing the Pisces energy that's going on, embracing the weirdness, embracing the dreamy part of Neptune. And, I, just like any other person, I really like talking about like manifesting. Of course, you guys know I usually use a different term for that. But something that I really do lean into is vision work, envisioning. I can't think of the term that's I'm supposed to be saying, but this moon conjoining Neptune is like getting your vision clear. It's really hard to know where to go or what exactly you want to do if your point B, or at least some type of goalpost, isn't clear. And with the moon conjoining Neptune, I think there is this excellent opportunity to be like, this is my goalpost. This is my point B. And it doesn't have to be, something when it comes to setting goals is it's really easy for people to set goals that are way too high that you can't accomplish, that just makes you go, oh, well, I'll never get, like, for example, if your goal is to make $20 billion, it's like, well, if you ever get into a moment where you're on your way to achieve that goal and you get a slight sense of depression or anxiety, or as if you can't do it, it's going to feel easy to give up because your goal is unattainable for you at this moment. Versus there's also a goal of setting things too close, too comfortable. It's like, oh, I have this goal of just getting out of bed. Like, you need to do something that's slightly out of your comfort zone, but that's within reach. And I love that for the moon conjoining Neptune of, getting a little bit excited for something, creating a vision that you know is possible, that you are capable of doing, but that challenges you enough to actually motivate yourself to do it, and that challenges you enough to know, hey, if you just push yourself a little harder, you can do that. And I'm bringing up all of this kind of motivation stuff because we're going into all this Aries stuff. We're almost done with the Pisces stuff for the moment. I mean, Saturn's there, but things are really moving forward into a more supercharged, energetic, action-oriented zodiac sign. So the moon conjoins Neptune. It's going to feel a little weird. The other thing is Venus is conjoining the North Node. So out of all of the planets, Venus likes the North Node the most, which is funny. A lot of people have this idea that the North Node is like this super amazing thing. And when you just get into like traditional astrology, that's not necessarily always the case. The North Node really brings things into extremes. The North Node is this all-consuming desire for something, or this like, urge to go in a specific direction. And it's been in Taurus, right? There's been this, for example, what's been funny is the whole Russia-Ukraine conflict. There's been this, for example, the South Node's in Scorpio and the North Node's in Taurus. There's been this urge and need for fertilizer. And there hasn't been any fertilizer because of the war in Ukraine. So then people have been going over for just straight up cow manure, but there's no cow manure, because everyone's buying the cow manure because of the fertilizer shortage. Excellent example of the North Node and the South Node in Taurus and Scorpio. However, as Venus is here, Venus is about, again, value, connection, love, romance, desire, fun. She's in her home sign now. She has all of the tools that she needs in order to get that job done, in order to, create wonderful situations. But as Venus is on the North Node, that desire is increased to like max volume. That desire is all the way to the extreme. So on one level, I think it's kind of like, if you, in our society nowadays, I think we overvalue desire. Like when you live a life full of desire, it's actually full of emptiness. And while in astrology, we call the benefics, Venus and Jupiter, the good planets, the benefics, oftentimes in modern society, when all of the things are available to us, when you live a life nothing of desire, it can take away. And so for certain people, I'd say if you are the type of person that just needs more pleasure, needs more desire, you might want to be careful about this day, especially with the moon on top of Neptune. But the other thing that I would like to talk about is, what is that desire that you have? What is it that you want? And I think with Venus and Taurus, it's very clear. And I think with it on the North Node, there's this like, it's a primal urge to have those desires fulfilled. And I think there's something important about Venus conjoining the North Node with this dark moon on top of Neptune. Like, what is your vision? What are you trying to get clear about? And how bad do you want it? Do you actually want it, or are you just saying that? And then the sun, of course, goes into Aries. It will go into Aries later on in the afternoon. And it's spring. It's time to begin. This is the astrological new year. And in my opinion, like, it's time to begin. It's time to go. And I think this is more true for Tuesday, which we'll talk about. But as the sun goes into Aries, our will becomes stronger. Our egos become stronger. Our ability to have that confidence and that clarity really comes through on Monday. So I like that. We get to Tuesday, though. And on Tuesday, the moon will make a square to Mars. And then it will ingress into Aries. Then it will conjoin Mercury after it has a new moon in Aries. So a lot going on Tuesday. Again, nothing really bad here yet. The other extremes happen a little bit later this week. But also for those that are new here, the underline means this is a highlight of the week. Tuesday, new moon in Aries. So as much as I love to sit here and be like, new moon, new you. I mean, this is also an Aries, like identity, new beginnings. This is a new moon with Jupiter in this sign. I've talked a lot about Jupiter and Aries lately. What are you fighting for? What are you willing to sink your teeth into? This new moon is like we get a new moon every 30 days. There's always a new chance to begin. But I want you to look at this as this is the beginning of the astrological new year. We're going into spring. Things are popping up out of the ground. Like here in Denver, the tulips are the first thing to come out of the ground. But this is Jupiter. We have spent May, June, July, August, September, October with Jupiter in Aries. It then went back into Pisces in November and December. And then late December, January, February, March of Jupiter and Aries. We've been really thinking about this area of our lives. Think about what house Aries rules in your chart. What are your beliefs around this area? Where have you, I would say like Jupiter is very spiritual. So it's like, What have you been, what journey have you gone through with your spirituality in this area of your life? I talked a lot about May and June and July, kind of like, we just kind of broke through the wall. We just Kool-Aid man through the place, and we just started something that maybe we bit off more than we can chew. And then as Jupiter went retrograde, we started to think about our actions. We started to think about what we're actually trying to conquer. We started to realize the war that's in front of us. And I mean that metaphorically, not literally. But you could probably put that literally. And so we get to this new moon, and Jupiter's still here. What have you learned in this area? Have you realized what is in front of you and what actions you have to take to do those things, to get to the goals that you want to get? And this new moon, it's not like any ordinary moon. It's really just like any ordinary moon, but I think it's special because Jupiter's here, and we've been really focusing on this area, and we've had some issues, and this is the time to clear this area out in your life and start a new beginning, go forward. And this is Aries. This is the time to attack. This is the time to be confrontational. This is the time to let all hell break loose. And you can't be afraid. Like, Aries is a part of your chart, wherever that's at in your chart, is the area in your life where you need to take aggressive action, where you need to be confrontational, where you need to have that spirit of the warrior. And so have that spirit on Tuesday. This is that new moon. This is that, and also too, a lot of this is just letting that feeling come to you. It's not like forcing yourself, but letting it come to you. After that, the moon conjoins Mercury, where the moon conjoining Mercury is kind of like, it's one of those things where, have you ever not wanted to jump into a cold river or something, and then you jump into it and then you're like, oh, you're just super stimulated, you're in the moment? I feel like the moon conjoining Mercury is being really in that moment. The other thing was, I forgot the other thing. Oh, that's really it. Oh, well, I will say earlier on Tuesday, the moon will be in late degrees of Pisces, and it's going to square Mars. It doesn't have to make sense. If you're just expecting everything in your life to, if you're just expecting to have a plan and everything to work out and everything needs to be in order before you take action, you're never going to go anywhere. Aries is about impulses, and this is the time to be impulsively or have an impulsive action. I think earlier on Tuesday, there'll be this feeling of I'm not sure if this is going to go right, or I'm not sure what to do, or I think you're going to get really wrapped in your head, and you've got to allow yourself to just silence that and just do it anyway. Don't let yourself spiral. Don't let yourself, talk you out of what you want to do. You have to just pull the trigger. So Tuesday's really motivating. We get to Wednesday, not much going on, but the moon is going to conjoin Jupiter, what's nice about this is, for right now, we have some crazy transits later in the week, so stick around. But the thing is here, we get all of Tuesday with this new moon to really focus on this area, and then we get Wednesday to cement that all in. The moon's going to be conjoining Jupiter, where are we doing all of the things that we said that we would? After all of these things that we've learned about, again, if you're not already on my Patreon, over on my Patreon where you can support this channel, I do monthly rising sign horoscopes. And so I've been talking about Jupiter through each person's zodiac sign. But if you're a Cancer rising, this is in your 10th house of your career, your reputation. What are you taking on? What have you been wanting to take on for some months now? And as this new moon happens, this is the time to reset that. And as the moon conjoins Jupiter, there is this sense of understanding, right? When you talk about the Karate Kid, when he was doing wax on, wax off, he didn't understand what he was doing then. Not until he got into the fight was when he understand why the wax on, wax off was so important. And that's kind of this moment here on Wednesday, is being able to connect the dots of why what you went through and why that learning stage was so important, because now it's time to actually use what you know. So that's really exciting. I want you guys to really take that, don't waste this opportunity. Again, there's always new opportunities around the door, but do you want to just stay where you're at consistently, or do you want to do something at least? We're not going to get Jupiter in Aries for another 12 years. And if you watch my delineation episode I did about Jupiter in Aries, Jupiter is going to be entering Taurus in 2 months, in less than a month, or a month and a half. If you want the rewards of Jupiter in Taurus, you have to take the action of Jupiter in Aries. So Wednesday is just, I think, cementing in and really having a clicking moment of oh, this is why I did all of this. This is starting to make sense. I'm starting to connect my beliefs and my education and my faith with my actions. So I really like that. And the other thing here too is Mars is still in Gemini. Mars enters Cancer this week. Mars still has, it's not fallen at least. Mars is still pretty decently well placed, and Mars is out of shadow. We've been going back and forth for so long on something, and it's time to actually do it now. Then we get into Thursday, and this is where Pluto goes into Aquarius. The moon will sextile Mars, and then it will enter Taurus. It'll sextile Saturn, and actually it will square Pluto. So I have just recently gotten so many new subscribers. Thank you guys so much for subscribing to my channel. I love and appreciate every single one of you. But a lot of you may not know about things that I've already talked about. I have been pretty vocal about my thoughts and feelings about Pluto and Aquarius. Over this past year, I have been much more on the negative side, and not to say that I'm much more on the positive side here, but like, here's the reality of the situation. While there's a really high chance something might happen on Thursday, and when I say something might happen, my three main predictions, which I've also gotten right, and a lot of astrologers have gotten wrong, as I said, all over this Mars retrograde, moving into March, the whole COVID narrative is going to collapse. My specific prediction is the jabs and the information about them and what damages they cause will become much more prevalent because that's really been silenced. But also, lab leak is now a big deal. Most people believe in it. That was not the case a year ago. You were called a conspiracy theorist for that. Now there's things about Fauci that are coming out about funding the gain of function stuff. And I know I'm not trying to get political, but here's the deal. Why Pluto hitting Aquarius is a big deal is on the day that the lockdowns happened, there was a Mars-Saturn conjunction at 0 Aquarius. This initiated the lockdown, right? Saturn in Aquarius, limitations and restrictions from authorities around society. Mars conjoining Saturn in Aquarius, separating yourself from society, self-isolating. Then, when we got to December of 2020, Jupiter conjoined Saturn at 0 degrees Aquarius. This was the day, December 19th, that the jabs, I can't say the other stuff because I'm trying to at least be somewhat courteous. I'm trying to not get too demonetized. They got emergency use authorization. And so that was the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. If you're not familiar with the Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions, every 20 years, Jupiter and Saturn conjoin in a zodiac sign. They're really big deals. They typically mark like new eras, new beginnings, new kings, new leaders. But every 200 years, Jupiter and Saturn conjoin in the same element. So for the past 200 years, Jupiter and Saturn have been conjoining in Earth signs. And besides 1981, when we had the first Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in an air sign, which was the AIDS pandemic, I don't know what the right phrasing is there. That was the first Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in air signs. And this was a big deal. What the jab was is very new technology. Nothing like that has ever been implemented on the world. Pluto rules corruption. Pluto rules power. Pluto rules fear. So you're going to see a few things. One, I did a delineation about this with Gordon White, no relation. Central bank digital currencies, digital passports are going to become a thing. And a reason I think the digital passports are going to become a thing is because as there's a new war front in Ukraine, which is going to happen, and a new war front eventually in Europe that's going to happen, there will be this, oh, we need to shut down, the borders. We need to be more specific about who comes in and who comes out. Like, this ingress is going to be a pretty big deal. And this isn't the first one. This is the first one, but it's not the last one. So central bank digital currencies, digital passports. And if you're watching this and you think I sound like a conspiracy theorist, like, here's the thing. Literally everything the conspiracy theorists have said over these past 3 years has come true. Not one thing that people of any type of authority figure has said over the past 3 years has even been remotely true. Like, I got a comment the other day about, I mentioned masks on one of my podcasts, and people are like, how can you say masks don't work? When it was literally like one of the biggest authorities in science and medical science literally just stated the masking didn't do anything. And so the only reason I'm bringing this up, and again, feel free to disagree, like, something I really appreciate my followers is, like, not all of you agree with me, and I love that. I'd rather have that than an echo chamber, but I'm also going to be honest with how I feel about this. And as we get to this moment, you're going to see Pluto, power and corruption, and how that played a role in the lockdowns and in the jabs. So this is going to be a really interesting transit. Another thing that I think you might see is, again, AI. I haven't talked enough about that. And my reason being is Pluto's going to be in Aquarius for the next 20 years. Like, this will eventually lead to, the robot, like, civil war where robots become slaves and then there's an uprising and we have to, and I know that sounds crazy, but just like, this is just how it is. And so why I'm bringing all of this up is giving you guys some perspective of what it's going to look like in the world. We just saw a couple banks collapse. That was something that I talked about in my a couple of my delineations about banks collapsing, and I've also made predictions. I predicted that the Fed would raise interest rates of March of 2022 back in August of 2021. So I've been correct about that, and a lot of people has asked me, when is the Fed going to pivot? And I've told people the Fed is not going to pivot. They want the pain as much as possible so they can implement something like a central bank digital currency. And I know that sounds kooky. I know that sounds wild. A lot of you probably don't even know what I'm talking about, and that's fine. But I'm bringing this up because this is a shift. This is a real shift. When Pluto entered Capricorn the last time, that was the last time I had a Pluto ingress, that was literally the 2008 financial collapse. It was within a month. So this is why I say I don't know if something specific is going to happen on this day, although the moon will ingress into Taurus and square Pluto. But you're going to see a shift, and this is in the Aquarius stuff. And the reason why I bring up all of the stuff that's happened over the past 2.5 years is because Saturn, which rules Aquarius, not Uranus. I got so many comments. They're like, Uranus rules Aquarius. No, it doesn't. Saturn ruled Aquarius for literally 5,000 years. And then when we discovered Uranus, a bunch of people were like, well, Uranus rules Aquarius now, which literally just destroys the 5,000 year tradition of astrology. So no, it doesn't. But Saturn's been here for the past 2.5 years. Saturn rules Aquarius, so we got to see what it really looks like for Saturn to be in Aquarius and what the Aquarius sign really represents. We saw lockdowns, we saw mass protests, we saw mass political divide, we saw a lot of authoritarian stuff coming from technology. The Twitter files will be really big for this kind of stuff. But I'm saying all this to say, expect a massive shift in this area. Think about, well, here's the other thing, and let me bring this on a personal level. I want you to think about 2020, 2021, what was going on for you in your life? What were the events that you were focusing on that were focused on limitations? In 2020, what limitations were brought to you that you didn't like, or maybe that were really constructive? And in 2021, where did you have to rethink this area of your life? Because Pluto is now going to be in that part of your chart for the next 20 years. And it's asking you, are you going to be afraid of it, or are you going to let it empower you? So this is some pretty extreme stuff here. I will have, again, this is a 20-year-long transit. I can't sit here and be like, this is exactly what Pluto in Aquarius is going to represent right now. I will, of course, talk so much more about this as we go on, but I would expect a shift on Thursday. And maybe we don't exactly see it. Like, something that I've learned with making like political or geopolitical predictions is something might happen on this day, but we may not hear about it. We may not hear about it for a while. Something I thought that was interesting was the U.S. Consulate, or the U.S. Was it the U.S. consulate? What's the thing where a government from a foreign nation has an office in a foreign country for their foreigners? I believe it's the consulate. I might be the ambassador. No, I think consulate, but I might be incorrect about that. America issued a warning to American residents. I think it was 2 days before the Turkish earthquake in Turkey, saying that you need to get out of Turkey. And what they were saying was that it's going to be a terrorist attack. But I just find it really coincidental that 2 days before one of the biggest earthquakes in Turkey, the American consulate was just like, oh, by the way, Americans, you should get out of here now. I only bring that up because Pluto is power. Pluto is corruption. And just like we saw Pluto in Capricorn, what did we see since 2008? We saw quantitative easing. We saw near 0% interest rates. So what does that mean? That means corporations can borrow money for essentially free, make all this money off of it while pretty much propping up the economy, which didn't really happen. A lot of people say that it's capitalism to blame, and this isn't capitalism. This isn't free market capitalism. This is the government and the corporations. Again, for when those banks failed, a lot of people were like, libertarian on the way up and socializing, personalizing the rewards while socializing the risks. That's what that's been. Like, that's something I heavily agree in. And so as we saw Pluto go through Capricorn, the sign of corporations, industry, governments, what do you think it's going to be with Aquarius? Now, the good side of this is we are going to see more social uprisings. We saw the French Revolution during this time. We saw the American Revolution during this time. We saw the Bill of Rights being created. So there is hope here, but that doesn't come without, the American Revolution didn't happen without a war. The French Revolution didn't happen without a war. Pluto being about power, fear, and control, and the sign of the people and the sign of society. That's going to be very obvious. We're going to see what that looks like there. But my guess is central bank digital currencies, digital passports, and, the like in that kind of territory. So the other thing on Thursday, I know I kind of talked a lot about that, but there is really a lot of talk talk to about that. And my frustration is a lot of astrologers aren't speaking about that like at all. And I find it very frustrating. So anyway, also on Thursday, the moon is going to sextile Mars, ingress into Taurus. So the moon will be in Gemini. It's going to sextile Mars again. My bad. The moon will be in Aries and it will sextile Mars. So what's nice about this is we're still in that energy. Like what I do like about Pluto here is like the power move, like the power switches. The sun's going to be sextiling Pluto. There is this empowerment that literally comes up. And while the moon's sextiling Mars, like it's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, where like all of the power is really shifting. And I think you guys are going to get like a fire lit up under your ass. The moon then goes into Taurus and it will square Pluto, which is interesting simply because Pluto freshly ingresses and then we'd immediately get a moon aspect to it. So that tells something. I can't really sit here and be like, oh, this is exactly what it's going to represent. But the fact that the moon, the bringer of light back down to Earth, is making an aspect to Pluto, I think you'll be really clear what some of this is. But as the moon goes into Taurus, and there is this feeling of trying to focus on security, or at least wanting security and wanting stability, it will sextile Saturn. Saturn's in Pisces, the sign of stability, the sign of authorities, the sign of structure, isn't a wet, mutable sign. It's not going to be as simple. But the thing is with the moon in Taurus sextiling Saturn in Pisces is like, it will be easy to adapt. But the moon will be conjoining Rahu, where there'll be this like, I need to feel comfortable. I need to feel secure. I need to feel stable. And I think you will get that feeling if you take all of the action that we have just already talked about on Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday. I think by this point you will feel secure. So we get to Friday. The moon will then make a conjunction to Venus and Uranus. It will conjoin Venus earlier in the day and then Uranus later on in the day. And the thing is with this, I actually really like this. Again, this is really going to take up a lot of people's attention span. Like we've already seen a couple banks fail. There's so much more to go on during this week. So this might be kind of really distracting over here, but as the moon conjoins Venus, on a personal level at least, we're really focusing on our desires. We're really focusing on our connections. What do we want? What is going to make us feel secure? What do we want that will make us feel secure? It's the same thing with like food. Like, you know, sometimes people think of comfort food. Like that's something I think a lot about with the moon, Venus, and Taurus is like just eating to make ourselves feel comfortable, to make ourselves feel stable, to make ourselves feel grounded at least. Like I think this is trying to get ourselves grounded. And in my opinion, I mean, like there's a lot of good elections. Like I think Thursday is a good election. I think Friday is a good election. What I mean by that are there's something called electional astrology, which is essentially, you know, casting a chart for the moment you want to start something, like start a business or, you know, get married or something like that. These are some really good elections here where if you want to start something, if you want to initiate something, these are great times to do it. These are very auspicious times to do it. So there's a lot of good here, okay? But that kind of brings us to Saturday. Saturday is when Mars enters Cancer. This is the rough part of this week out of everything. The moon will sextile Neptune and then ingress into Gemini and square. Moon will sextile Neptune and then ingress into Gemini. For a second, I was like, did I just write the moon enters Neptune? The moon will sextile Neptune, enter Gemini, square Saturn. So there's some weird stuff going on Saturday, but like here's the thing with Saturday. Mars enters Cancer. This is a really big deal. Again, I think that we are going to see a bigger war front in Ukraine. And the scary part about that is that involves NATO, and something that I've been predicting is World War III at some point. And if NATO gets involved, that really changes the face of everything that we've got going on. And I say this like, look, there's really nothing that you need to be afraid of, by the way, like unless you live in like Ukraine or Europe. And even then, like you can't live your life in fear. Like something that I struggle with as an astrologer is like, how do I tell people what's coming up and being realistic? Like, yeah, bad shit happens. Like I'd rather tell you bad shit's happening than all the other astrologers be like, you're going to meet your twin flame and soulmate and everything's going to be so great tomorrow. It's like, that's not how life works. It's just not. Like wake up to reality. But it's super hard to be an astrologer and say that stuff without striking the fear of God into people. And the thing is, like, you guys got to develop faith. You got to develop hope. You got to know where the bad shit's coming. And if you know that the world is going to see some pretty intense stuff here over the next few years, you can at least expect that, and you can hope for the best and plan for the worst. And the way I look at this Mars ingress is on one, again, this whole week you can just say is like very geopolitical in just one sentence. Like there's going to be a lot of things going on in the world that it's going to be very confusing. Just like like for example, think of when COVID hit, it was like COVID hit. Everyone became a virologist. Everyone had all of the information. And all that turned out to be wrong. And like, and the same thing with the Ukraine war. The war hysteria got super loud. So the hysteria might be really loud this week. So I think it's going to be really important for you to find like your own, like centering yourself somewhere. And also, if you're afraid of all of this stuff, like I challenge you to get really into like your own spirituality. Like, do you have a faith practice? Why do you lack faith? Because there is no astrology without faith. Like, and it's super funny. Our brains as human beings, we're so funny. Anything bad anything that's bad, we hyper focus on that. But I could tell you this is good, this is good, this is good, and it'll just go right over your head because you're only focused on the bad. And there is bad and good to life, right? It's a balance. It's just about knowing where. The thing is with Mars entering Cancer is Mars has been in Gemini since late August, September, October, November, December, January, February. Now we're at the very end of March. So it's been 8 months. Mars has been in here for 8 months in Gemini, and it finally ingresses into its sign of fall. This is not a sign that Mars likes. Mars likes to be Mars likes to fight. Mars likes to kill. Mars likes to burn. I almost said Mike. Mars is going into the sign of babies. Like Cancer, like babies, nurturing, protecting. Mars does not do well here. And what I mean by that is where Mars wants to fight, Mars wants to conquer. And this is another reason why I've been saying all this new moon stuff. You need to take action now because it's going to be much harder on Saturday when Mars goes into Cancer. Because Mars in Cancer is going to be about defending. It's going to be about protecting. It's going to be about doing what you need to do. You can't be on the offense right now if like, you can't, for example, you can't go and save the world if like your own house is burning. Like you've got to do what you've got to do to protect yourself. But here's the beautiful part, and we'll talk about this more next week. Mars is going to be trining Saturn. This is really nice. Like there is support in this. There is a helping hand in this. The biggest thing though is that the energy shifts from being like, I need to do this, I need to do that, I need to do this, I need to do that, to what do I just need to take care of? It's not going to feel good. Mars in Cancer is not feeling good. It's kind of like if you get a cut and you just leave it around and then it gets infected and then it's like, all right, you got to go to the doctor. They're going to have to open that bitch up. They're going to have to clean it out with some, hydrogen peroxide or something like that. It's not going to feel good, but you can't think of the pain of the moment of having to take care of something. You have to think of the fulfillment of doing something that you need to take care of, that you might have been putting off, that you don't want to do. And, Mars is about fights and confrontation, and it's in the sign of Cancer. This is like, we're going to be crabby. We're going to be emotional. It's not going to feel wonderful, but there's a problem with the Cancer sign, right? Cancer is like emotions and feelings and sensitivity, and Mars is there. So clearly there's some type of issue that we have there. And Mars is trining Saturn. Saturn is asking you, again, responsibility, discipline, maturity. It's in the sign of Pisces of having faith. You need to be more faithful. And with Mars in Cancer, it's like, you can't be afraid to express your emotions. You can't be afraid to do the things that you need to take care of, that even if they make you feel insecure, even if they make you feel weak, you have the ability to do that. And so this is what I think is important about this. The moon will then enter Gemini and it's going to square Saturn. Like for example, confessing something to someone that you don't want to confess is not going to feel good. It also may not even, like, just because you're honest doesn't mean people are like, oh, well, you're honest, so we're just going to completely forgive you. Like the moon in Gemini is like, I need to say something. Like I'm emotional. This is something I don't want to do. I need to say something. And it's going to square Saturn. They may not like it. They may not want to hear that, and they might react. But what's more important is that you were honest and that you said something that you needed to say, that you needed to get off your chest, and you did something that you needed to do. And you can't worry about the reaction. You can't worry. Like, you have to just know where your intentions are at. As long as you're being true to yourself, as long as you're being true to what you need to do and not just avoiding that, then you're in the right place. You might have done something wrong, or maybe someone else did something wrong and they've got to tell it to you. And like, you've got to I just think Saturday is going to be pretty rough on a few things. One, I think there's going to be something that's going to be communicated that will kind of hurt. And I think we're going to start being emotionally crabby for a while. Okay. So this is why I was kind of hyping up this new moon. It's so important to do everything on this new moon so that when we're here, we have the strength and the courage to manage this, right? Like, you don't want to just give up and not do anything. And then you get to this, then it's like, well, fuck. Like, if you're on a sick one, and here's the thing with the universe is so funny. The second you start something, the second that you're like, I'm going to do this and it's going to be super good, the universe will throw a fucking wrench in your plans. And the universe will say, are you sure you're going to do that? And all that is just a challenge to make sure you're honoring your word. Because if you say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, then you get a challenge thrown in your face. And then you go, oh, well, now I can't because of this. And then the universe goes, okay, you're not about your word. That's fine. Or you can say, I'm going to take this challenge, I'm going to take this obstacle, and I'm going to go through it anyway because I'm more dedicated to what my word was. I'm more dedicated to what my vision is. And I'm not going to let any challenge and any wall stop me. And that's a personal decision you have to make. We get to Sunday, the moon in Gemini. It doesn't actually sextile Mercury and Jupiter. That's actually something we'll be talking about next week. It will be applying to a sextile with Mercury and Jupiter for the whole day. So a lot of Sunday is kind of like weeding out things. This is our first moon in Gemini transit without Mars. So I think it's going to be easier to communicate, have some clarity. I think on like Saturday is like a rough communication. Sunday is kind of like, what does this mean moving forward? What does this mean? And what does this look like for me now? Maybe this is like having to have a rough conversation with your partner. And then Sunday is like talking to your friends about it, or like having someone there to just like, vent to, essentially. Sunday looks like a lot of venting, in my opinion. So we get to next week, we're going to have a Mercury-Jupiter conjunction. We're going to have a Venus-Uranus conjunction, and we're going to have a Mars-Saturn trine. Next week is also a lot, guys. Like I've been saying, this is the snowball that's turning into an avalanche, and this week and next week are avalanche week. Like we've got a lot of things coming down the pipe here, and I think next week just continues everything. Next week looks a lot better. This week just has so many changes and that are so disruptive that I think it's going to feel chaotic, versus next week is going to feel easier to cement all of these in. So with that being said, I love and appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for being here. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, all the good stuff, and I'll be seeing you next week.